Imagine for a second, right, that you spend your whole life reading like every major philosophy and self-help book ever written. You have the quotes memorized, the impressive bookshelves, I mean, the whole intellectual package.
Right, you look like you have it all figured out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, you still feel this deep, restless emptiness. And, well, that tension is the core of what we're unpacking in today's deep dive. We are looking at the spiritual philosophy of Guru Amar Das Ji, specifically his writings in Rag Sorath, which is essentially, a musical framework in Sikh scripture designed to evoke a specific emotional state.
Yeah, and our mission today is to really explore this massive gap between building a scholarly ego and actually finding genuine internal peace. Because the text immediately challenges our default metric for success.
Right. We tend to assume that gathering knowledge is just always a net positive.
Exactly. But here, the argument is that reading driven by egotism,
Hmm.
learning just to prove how smart you are, it actually exhausts people. It ruins them through what the text calls duality.
Duality, meaning like the illusion of separation. Because when you're constantly trying to prove you know more than the next person, you are fundamentally separating yourself from them. And by extension, from any sense of universal unity.
Yeah, I mean, duality isolates you completely. The text actually redefines what a wise scholar or a pandit actually is.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, it says it's not someone who just memorizes scripture to win debates. A true pandit is someone who actively searches within, and contemplates the Guru Shabad, the Guru's word.
Right, and that internal contemplation is what actually opens the door of salvation.
Exactly. And whether you view that as literal spiritual salvation or just the psychological freedom of not having to constantly prove your worth, I mean, the mechanism is the same.
Let me just pause on that, though, because I do want to push back a little here. If analyzing texts is a worldly trap that fuels the ego, aren't we like falling into that exact trap right now by analyzing this specific scripture?
Bro. That's a great point. But the trap isn't the text itself. The trap is the attachment to being the knower of the text. It's the difference between reading a map to actually reach a destination versus reading a map just to brag about knowing geography.
Ah, I love that. Which actually brings us to the people who try to reach that destination through sheer physical effort.
Right. The pilgrims.
Yeah, there is this striking image in the source describing wandering holy men who grow completely exhausted from making endless pilgrimages to sacred shrines. But despite all that walking, they haven't conquered their own minds. I mean, you can walk 1,000 miles, but you take your ego right along with you.
You really do. And the physical exhaustion is just completely useless if the internal landscape remains untouched. So the alternative offered here is this concept of dying while living.
Wait, dying while living? That sounds like a total paradox.
It does. But a spiritually guided person, a gulmukh,
Mm-hmm.
basically lets the Shabad burn away the filth of the ego.
Okay, mechanically that sounds like an ego death. Like you are physically here, paying your bills, talking to people, but the you that needs to be right or needs to be seen as holier than thou,
Yeah.
that part just flatlines.
Exactly. If your ego is like an outdated operating system constantly running these anxious background processes,
Mm-hmm.
worrying about how smart you look or how many shrines you visited, the Shabbat is like a hard reboot.
Right, it wipes the malware.
Exactly. You die to those worldly attachments but remain very much alive and absorbed in the true Lord.
But nature abhors a vacuum. If you are shedding all these outward rituals, intellectual trophies, and the ego itself, like, what is left to hold you together? You can't just be empty.
Well, you replace that heavy, clunky armor of superiority with what the text beautifully calls the robes of forgiveness. True spiritual adornment isn't physical at all.
Oh, wow, adorning the soul, basically.
Right. It requires embracing forgiveness and continuously chanting the name, which is essentially keeping the divine presence, that core truth, constantly active in your mind day and night.
And keeping that internal connection alive is what leads to the text's claim that all sins are eradicated in an instant, which, isn't some magical cosmic eraser.
No, not at all.
By internalizing this devotion, you are fundamentally rewiring your priorities. The mistakes or sins driven by the ego just vanish because, well, the ego itself is no longer driving the car.
Yeah, the game of life isn't won by how much trivia you know or how many shrines you visit. It's won through this quiet internal devotion and, crucially, through divine mercy. That is when the peace actually takes root.
So it means that true peace is entirely an inside job. It relies on internal searching way more than any outward displays of religiosity. Which brings us right back to those impressive bookshelves we started with.
Right back where we started.
It really leaves you with something to mull over today. If you were to strip away all your outward achievements, your intellectual trophies, and your external displays of goodness, well, what would your internal spiritual wardrobe actually look like?